Good afternoon, everybody. Pigskin Pete here. Happy special Sunday edition to everybody. Man, the end of the college football season has smacked us all in the face in the past few days. We still got a lot going on in the offseason, so don't worry. I'll be covering all of it. We have transfers. We have new coaches. The list goes on and on. There'll be news coming out day after day. We have the signing period in February. We have spring practice in April. So there's a lot going on, and I'll continue to cover this stuff day by day. But this is something that I promised I would do, and something I did at the end of the last college football season, where I was right, and where I was wrong. Because I make a lot of statements throughout the year, saying things about certain teams and coaches and making predictions, and I'm not going to be right about everything, but I was right about a lot of stuff, and then, of course, I'm going to go ahead and admit where I was wrong. So let's go ahead and start. Let's start with where I was right. The first and most notable thing. So before the season started, Will Muschamp in South Carolina were being given a lot of credit that they didn't deserve. They won 9 games last year, and there was a lot of people out there on YouTube and on social media, and even in the mainstream media, especially in the mainstream media, actually, that had Will Muschamp. He's taking this thing in the right direction. Hell, they gave this guy an extension and a raise for 6 years. And I was on here and I said, listen, Will Muschamp, he has a history. He had a history as a head coach at Florida, and he's going to do the same thing at South Carolina. And lo and behold, he had a good year at Florida. The next year was way worse. Last year, he had a decent year at South Carolina. And I said, if they won 9 games last year, they're more than likely going to win 7 or 8 games this year. And everybody's going to be disappointed and wanting him to be fired. Well, looks like I was right about that. Not only did they only win 7 games, but they had an embarrassing and pitiful loss in the Belk Bowl to a Virginia team, and they got shut out 28-0, and that's just inexcusable. So now, finally, there's a large group of the South Carolina fan base that is agreeing with Pete, and if they're not ready to kick him out of the door right now, a lot of them have a very, very, very short leash on him. And I'm going to go ahead and make a bold prediction now before the season even thinks about getting started. I mean, we're almost a year away from that, right? I think Will Muschamp, his last year at South Carolina will be next year. Listen, they won 7 games this year. They'll be lucky to win 7 games next year. They have a very tough schedule. Obviously, they have Alabama, Georgia, and Clemson, 3 of the top 5 programs in America right now. And, of course, they will probably still lose a couple of games. They shouldn't. They'll probably lose to Texas A&M also. I think Texas A&M is better than them. That's 4 losses right there. And, I mean, they can't beat Kentucky. They've lost to them 5 years in a row. I wouldn't be surprised if they drop one to Florida. So, I mean, this is just – it's not looking good for South Carolina next year. If it were me, I'd go ahead and cut ties with the guy now and cut my losses and go ahead and get this thing moving in the right direction for the future. But they won't do that because they probably can't afford to, being the fact that they just gave this guy a big extension. And so, anyway, I told you guys so, and there you have it. Will Muschamp is going to be a bust. Next on the list, where I was right. Man, I caught a lot of flack for this one, too. Poor Michigan. Jim Harbaugh. Again, this is another team that the mainstream media was hyping up to a T. A lot of people on YouTube, same thing. I was never a believer in Michigan. I was never a believer in Jim Harbaugh. Now, was Michigan a good team this year? Yes. That wasn't surprising to me at all, that Michigan was a good team. But I said, leave it to Jim Harbaugh to have a good team, still not beat Ohio State, still not win the Big Ten, and still not get into the playoffs. And lo and behold, I was right on all accounts. Now, the dynamic for next year obviously changes quite a bit with Urban Meyer retiring. I still, until I see it, I realize that Michigan will probably end up being the favorite going into next year to win the Big Ten. But I'm not going to believe it till I see it. I mean, this is a hump that they're going to have to get over. They're going to have to beat Ohio State, and they're going to have to win the Big Ten. And I'm just going to go out on a limb and say I'm not believing it again next year. I still think that Ohio State, in my mind, is the favorite next year. Even though they have a new coach, they still have a ton of talent. Obviously, the acquisition of Justin Fields is huge. And so I'm still sticking with Ohio State in the Big Ten until I see any differently. So, again, I was right about Jim Harbaugh and Michigan for the 2018 season. Let's see. Next on the list, I mean, I could get on here for an hour and talk about how much I was right about Clemson. I made a video before the year saying all the factors that were going to play into Clemson being a dominant team this year and most likely winning the national championship. Now, call and say they're definitely winning the national title this year. I never will do that. That's a foolish thing to do because it's so hard to do that. But all the reasons I named, with the defensive lineman coming back, with the hotshot freshman quarterback and Trevor Lawrence coming in, and then, of course, the revenge factor, which after getting blown out by Alabama last year, I thought that this team was on a mission to avenge themselves and get revenge on Alabama. And that's exactly what happened. So couldn't be more proud of my team, and I think I called at least them getting to the title game. I don't think anybody saw the blowout coming, but anyway, it did happen. So I was right on all accounts about Clemson, including the Kelly Bryant, Trevor Lawrence situation. Now, I didn't know that Kelly Bryant was going to transfer, but I called it. I said, because the big question coming into the season with Trevor Lawrence coming in was, is Kelly Bryant going to get the starting job at the beginning of the year, and will he keep it the entire year? And my prediction was that right around game 2 or 3, you would see them make that change. And it happened after game 4, so I was about a game off. But they made the change, and then, of course, Kelly Bryant transfers. Everybody thinks the sky's falling. Everyone's criticizing Dabo Swinney for so-called running off Kelly Bryant, and they made a huge mistake, and now there's no way they can win the title with this true freshman leading the way. And, well, me and Dabo Swinney proved everybody wrong. So I liked the move when he did it, and it turns out I was right about that. So right on all accounts as far as Clemson goes. Next on the list, where I was right about Louisville. Yeah, so I don't know if this is a big shocker now. Louisville, after they lost Lamar Jackson to the NFL, I just figured that they were going to be terrible. I did not know they were going to be like the most terrible team in the country like they were, pretty much. I mean, them in Kansas. I mean, is there another team that you can think of besides Oregon State and Kansas that was worse than Louisville? I can't. They were pretty much the worst of the worst. And I figured that since they were going to fall off so quickly, that Bobby Petrino would be on the hot seat. Well, he didn't even make it. He didn't even make it through the year. I mean, this guy got fired towards the end of the season, right? So I was right on all accounts about Louisville, that they were going to be terrible, and I think they're probably going to be getting better here. I like the coaching change that they made. I like the guy they hired from Appalachian State, but it's going to take a few years to get that thing rolling. So Louisville, I was right about them. Last but not least, where I was right, Jalen Hurts. Now, I've been saying that Jalen Hurts is going to transfer, and some Alabama fans agree with me, some didn't. Hell, I even had some Clemson fans coming on here and saying, "Oh no, Jalen Hurts, he ain't transferring. He's a stand-up guy." And I made videos about this upon videos about this, about the difference between Kelly Bryant and Jalen Hurts' situation. The fact that Kelly Bryant was a graduate and he couldn't take another snap at Clemson after that 4th game, or he would not be eligible to play this coming season. That's why he left. He was literally 1 snap away from his college career ending. Jalen Hurts wasn't. Jalen Hurts finished the year, graduated. Now he can transfer and go wherever he wants and not have to sit out a year. And a lot of Alabama fans, he's not transferring. Well, turns out I was right. Jalen Hurts is transferring, and this is going to be great to see where he's going. I'm going to do a lot of coverage on this because, there's a lot of different places. We're talking about Maryland because of the coach that the new head coach there was the former OC at Alabama. Another OC from Alabama went to Miami, and of course Jalen Hurts may go to Miami. They have a new coach there, head coach, and new entire coaching staff. And there's some other places being thrown around out there, Oklahoma, Auburn. I mean, there's a lot of different, TCU, I've heard, Houston. So we'll see. That'll be interesting. But I told you so, and good luck to Jalen Hurts. Now, this is what everyone really wants to know. They want to see me eat crow, right? Where I was wrong. So I couldn't have been more wrong about LSU and Ed Orgeron. Now, I love Ed Orgeron. If you go and watch my videos, if you're an LSU fan, a lot of them get real triggered and get mad at me when I make these videos about Ed Orgeron. Don't get it twisted, okay? I don't dislike Ed Orgeron. I didn't think he's a very good head coach. I didn't think LSU had a chance to compete for the West, or certainly not for playoff positions as long as Ed Orgeron was there. I thought they were going to have a pretty mediocre season this year. But I love Ed Orgeron. I mean, he's gold. him and Mike Leach are two of my favorite coaches in the country for obvious reasons. So I don't dislike Ed Orgeron. I do think he's a good coach. I just didn't think that he was on the level of some of the top guys. But LSU had a great year this year. LSU won 10 games. They won some big games. I mean, their offense is still left a lot to be desired. But I think that Ed Orgeron is going to be there for a little while. So I'm going to eat crow on that. I said that I thought that LSU was going to win probably about 7 games, and they won 10. And so good for them. And they had some, like I said, some really big wins against Georgia. Who else did they beat? Anyway, you saw what they did this year. They had a great season, and I think they'll continue. And if they can get any semblance of an offense in there at some point, then they will be at least a challenge in the West against Alabama, Auburn, and of course Texas A&M. It's another up and coming team in the West that people need to look out for. So anyway, I was wrong about Ed Orgeron and LSU. I was wrong about Miami. Oh man, was I couldn't have been more wrong about Miami. So I bought the fool's gold. Miami had one great season in 2017. They got ranked up as high as number 3 or 4 in the country at some point in the playoff poll. They go on to lose their last 3 games of the season in embarrassing fashion. Obviously, they got absolutely mollywopped by Clemson, and then they got handled and destroyed by Wisconsin in the Orange Bowl. And but anyway, I still thought that Miami was up and coming. Their defense was amazing, and they had they had a lot of pieces on offense coming back. And I just thought that the state of the ACC was such that Miami would blow through, or at least only have maybe one challenger in the ACC Coastal Division, and they would meet Clemson in Charlotte for the ACC title game. And man, Miami just sort of from week 1 just never looked good, and they just never got things together. They were pretty much terrible all year. Of course, that led to the firing of Mark Richt, which is probably for the best. I don't know if we were even 3 games into the season before Miami fans had pretty much given up on Coach Mark Richt. And so the inevitable happened. He got fired, and I think they made a good hire with Manny Diaz. And it looks like Manny Diaz is making some moves right now. So I think Miami will be back in the conversation next year for the ACC anyway, for the Coastal Division. I mean, there's still Clemson here in the ACC, and everybody else is way down here. But there's out of all the teams in the ACC over the next couple years that can start inching and closing that gap, I'd put Miami on that list. So we'll see what happens. But I was wrong. I thought Miami was going to be much, much, much better than they were this year. Next on the list, Auburn. I was really wrong about Auburn, and I think everybody else was too. They had what was considered to be a top 3 defensive line in the country. They had Jarrett Stidham, who's a veteran quarterback coming back this year. They had all the pieces. And, considering how last season ended, the season before last season ended, where they had knocked off Alabama and Georgia in the regular season at the end of the year. Now, we know they lost to UCF. Everyone was trying to chalk that up to them just being disappointed about not making the playoffs. So, but I thought that Auburn was going to be a top 5 team. Certainly it's in the top 10 without a doubt at the end of this season, whether or not they made the playoffs or not. And man, they just they started out of the gate pretty strong and then just sort of fell off, had some head-scratching losses. And things sort of seemed to fall apart there in the locker room. And now, of course, we have Auburn fans, I think, are split. You have one half of the fan base that is ready to move on from Gus Malzahn. The other half is really ready to see if it was just a bad year and they can come back next year and compete with Alabama for the West. So we'll see. But I was wrong about Auburn, man. I thought they were a legit title contender this year, and they just didn't come anywhere close to that. Next on the list, another ACC team that I was way wrong about, Virginia Tech, and I'm giving up on this guy. I've given up on him, Justin Fuente. I've been on this guy's bandwagon since the day they hired him. Well, he came from Memphis, and I've given him a lot more leeway than I would any other coach, especially in the ACC. This guy's an offensive mind. Is the reason they brought him in from Memphis is because Virginia Tech has been lacking a competent offense since Obama's first term. And not only did Virginia Tech not get their offense together, he's in his 4th year this year, and this is the year he's supposed to either put up or shut up. And I said, if Virginia Tech does not get their stuff together this year, then I'm off the bandwagon, and I am officially off the bandwagon. I'm not a believer in Justin Fuente anymore, and I'm not a believer in Bud Foster anymore either. This guy's been the head defensive coordinator at Virginia Tech for like 30 years. And all you hear year after year is, this is one of the best defensive coordinators ever in history. This guy's amazing. And their defense was terrible this year. And you can make all the excuses you want. Maybe they had a young defense, or this reason, that reason. They had injuries, blah, 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 blah. I'm done with them. I'm done with Bud Foster. I'm done with Justin Fuente. And I'm done pretending as if Virginia Tech has a chance to compete for the ACC. So Virginia Tech, get your stuff together. And I hope you do, because there's teams like Miami, Florida State, Virginia Tech that I really do want to be good teams. I think it's good for the ACC. And obviously I want Clemson to stay on top, but I'd like to see some competition over there, man. It's getting pretty, it's getting ridiculous. Get your stuff together, guys. But I was way wrong about Virginia Tech. And last but not least, oh man, I was really, really wrong about Penn State this year. I thought Penn State was going to win the Big Ten. And I know that was a sort of a dark horse pick for me, because the obvious pick for everybody every year is to pick Ohio State to win it. But I'm a big believer in their head coach. I know they lost Saquon Barkley the year before, but they had Trace McSorley coming back. They had a new good running back taking his place. They had a bunch of great pieces on defense. I just thought that Penn State was on the rise and was going to be able to sort of take that next step and be that dominant team that can compete with Ohio State. Now, in a one-game situation, can they compete with Ohio State? Yes. They prove that year after year. They play them tough every year. It's always a great game. But look, Penn State, man, you had some bad games this year. Penn State just was left nothing to be desired, and they really proved me wrong. I don't even know what place they came in the Big Ten, but it wasn't great. The Big Ten had a sort of a down year as a whole, even though if you talk to a Big Ten fan, they'll tell you different. But listen, I mean, Wisconsin was no good. I mean, the entire West was just terrible. All right, they were right there with the ACC Coastal as far as how bad they were. And then, of course, Michigan, disappointing, and then Penn State also disappointing. So it is what it is, man. I was wrong about Penn State, but I think I'm still a believer in Penn State. I haven't jumped off their train yet. All right, I still think that Penn State has the pieces and the recruiting and everything that you need to make a run here. But Ohio State's still the big boy on the block, Urban Meyer or no Urban Meyer. So somebody's going to have to get it together there and give them a run for their money. But anyway, so there you have it, folks. I'm sure if I forgot anything, you guys can let me know what else I was wrong about. And I'll put some thought into it and find some more stuff that I was right about too, since that's really what's most important here. What I was right about is all that really matters. Just everybody forget what I was wrong about. That does not matter. It's pointless. Anyway, I'll be back on with you guys soon to cover more off-season college football news. Did anybody see the game last night? Is anything better than watching the Cowboys lose? The only thing that's better than watching the Cowboys lose last night is watching the Patriots lose today. Pigskin Pete, check it out.